Amongst many other things, not all of them good, Armstrong Powerhouse is a third-party TS Classic developer known for their enhancement packs, which take existing models, mostly from Dovetail Games, and try to improve them with more model variants, better sounds, physics, features, and liveries, although the quality of these EPs is very inconsistent, especially if a comparison between the Class 86 and Class 455 EPs is anything to go by. For a little while now, I've had an idea to highlight a small selection of British locomotives and multiple units in TS that, in my opinion, don't get much recognition these days, and would really benefit from new enhancement packs. I dare say AP would be the only developer to do it, since they don't have much, if any, competition when it comes to British diesels and electrics in this game. I left the Class 166 Networker Turbo off the main list because it kind of goes without saying that this unit is in dire need of the AP treatment. But instead of just an enhancement pack, the 166 needs an entirely new model, preferably one that's done to the same standard as the Class 205 Thumper, and the Class 165 could be included too. As another brief aside, I would like to see AP, or any other developer really, as long as it isn't Rivet, make the Class 334 Juniper for Train Simulator. I find it so bizarre that no one's ever made the 334, despite the presence of Rivet Games' suburban Glasgow Northwest route, which includes a decently long section of the North Clyde line. While we at least have the Class 314 and Class 318, plus an imitation 320 as part of the old Class 321 pack, the rail scene on this route still looks and feels incomplete without the Class 334, which you would see on the Helensburgh Central to Edinburgh Waverley service. But now that the 334 segment is out of the way, we can go on to my main list of suggestions. The first cab off the rank, as it were, may come across as a strange one, given that AP don't really cover the pre-1960s diesels. That fact aside, this is the Class 24 diesel locomotive, of which 151 examples were built between 1958 and 1961. The TS Classic version was released in November 2015, but I'm not sure if it's a former Iron Horse House model or not. In any case, I was trying to decide between the Class 24 and Class 25 to feature in this video, since both engines are similarly bad, in my opinion. But I chose the 24 because I own a model of locomotive number 24035 in BR Blue, and I generally prefer 24s over 25s anyway. As for where I got the model, it was from a shop in Melbourne, Australia. As for why I think the Class 24 should get an enhancement pack, it's because I consider this locomotive to be a disappointing add-on in her default state. The horn is reused from the old Thomson Class 455-9, of all things. You don't get any pre-tops variants, the functionality is pretty basic, the textures aren't all that good, the buffer beam is the wrong colour for the BR Blue livery, and I'm not a fan of the default prime mover sounds. If AP made an enhancement pack for this locomotive, that would be a good opportunity to include all the other liveries these things wore throughout their lives, such as BR Green, BR Two-Tone Green, and the RTC Departmental Blue and Red. As it stands now, I hardly ever drive the Class 24 myself, and it's a shame that one of my favourite early British diesels was, in my opinion, done so poorly in TS. Next up, we have the Class 92 electric locomotive, of which 46 examples were built between 1993 and 1996. They were intended for hauling sleeper trains through the Channel Tunnel, but have since proven to be quite versatile on other duties in the UK itself or on the continent, thanks to their dual voltage capabilities. These days, at least 18 of them are still in service in the UK, with one of their regular assignments being to haul the Caledonian Sleeper passenger train. The Class 92 was released for TS Classic in March 2014. This locomotive is still pretty versatile in the game, with plenty of realistic routes available to run on. But, personally, I think the locomotive leaves a lot to be desired in her default state. She only comes with one livery, and has mediocre textures and subpar sounds in physics, such is the nature of a Dovetail product. Incidentally, AP actually made a sound pack for the Class 92 in 2015. It cost £5 at the time, which wasn't a bad deal since you got 3 extra liveries and enough features to the point where it could be considered an enhancement pack by today's standards. This begs the question as to why the sound pack has since been discontinued, and unless you already had the sound pack, you'll be stuck with the default sounds, physics and features. One can only hope that AP will make a proper Class 92 enhancement pack someday. Next is the Class 360 Desiro electric multiple unit. More specifically, the 4-car 360/1, since we've never had the 5-car 360/2 variant in the game. 21 examples of the 360/1 variant were built in 2002 and 2003, initially to run regional services on the Great Eastern Main Line out of London Liverpool Street. But following the introduction of the Class 720 and Class 745 EMUs, the 360/1s are now working with East Midlands Railway, who use them on services from London St Pancras to Corby. You can only get the 360 for Train Simulator as part of Dovetail's GEML London to Ipswich route, which was released in August 2013. But these days, I almost never drive on that route due to it still being quite unstable, more so than the majority of routes in my collection. It doesn't help that the route is now looking rather outdated 11 years after its release. This is partly because the real line has seen several major infrastructure changes since 2013. I should also mention that the 360 is the only train included with the London to Ipswich route. Make of that what you will. For the most part, I like the Class 360, with one reason being her lack of cab-end gangways. Unfortunately, DTG's recreation of the unit in TS hasn't really aged well. The physics are a bit iffy, the modelling and textures are noticeably dated, especially in the passenger view and cab. There is no auto-numbering on this unit, and you can only change the destination display in the scenario editor. You only get one livery with the unit as standard, but AP's old Class 360/444/450 sound pack also came with the first Great Eastern livery. The sound pack was discontinued a fair while ago and replaced by enhancement packs for the Class 350, 444 and 450 units, although the 350 EP is actually built on a disguised Class 450 instead of a proper 350 model. As for the 360, one wonders why AP still hasn't made an EP for that unit as well. If they ever do, they could include a representation of the 5-car 360/2, as well as all the liveries ever carried by the class, from First Great Eastern Barbie to East Midlands Railway Maroon. From an early 2000s era Desiro, we now go to an old slam-door EMU from the southern region. This is the Class 402 to HAL, easily the oldest entry on this list, having first appeared in 1938. They were designed for long-distance or semi-fast services from London Victoria to Maidstone and Gillingham, over routes that were newly electrified at the time. The design was based on the 2 Bill, later designated as Class 401, albeit with a toilet in only one coach, instead of both coaches having one toilet each. The 2 Howls lasted a reasonably long time in service, with the last units in regular passenger service not being withdrawn until 1971, following replacement by newer units like the 4 VEP, later designated as Class 423. Sadly, none of the 2 Howls have survived into preservation, but more information on these curious little units can be found through the link in the description. In October 2017, Dovetail released the Class 402 as an add-on for Train Simulator. I remember being excited for this unit when I found out she was coming to TS, but she has since turned out to be mediocre at best, at least in my opinion. For one thing, the sounds are reused from the Class 415/6 4EPB, and I don't particularly like these sounds, but it's interesting to note that the green unit has an air whistle, while the blue unit has a 2-tone horn, although the green unit's whistle audio is directly recycled from the Class 483. Besides the underwhelming sounds, other issues I have with the Class 402 to HAL are the lack of opening cabside windows, lack of auto-numbering, which means each coach spawns with a different unit number, unrealistic sounds for the cab controls, doors not opening when you're in the passenger view, and the apparent dynamic headcode functionality turning out to be a lie. In fact, you can only change the headcodes in the scenario editor. I refer you to the Blood and Custard website again for information on the right individual coach numbers for each 2 HAL unit. On the plus side, this thing is relatively easy to drive, although Dovetail didn't bother explaining the series, parallel and weak field control system in the manual. As I alluded to earlier, you only get 2 liveries with the Class 402 add-on, namely Southern Railway Green and British Rail Blue. You don't get a BR Green livery with yellow warning panels, and the variants rebuilt for de-icing, stores or parcels duties are not included either. Incidentally, the stores units outlasted most of their classmates by at least 14 years. Where modelling, features, sounds and physics are concerned, Armstrong Powerhouse's rendition of the Class 411 SEP takes Dovetail's rendition of the Class 402 and absolutely blasts it out of the water. In any case, it's unrealistic to see 2 HALs running on these modern image routes due to the unit's lack of AWS. As unlikely as it would probably be, especially given the lack of any late 60s or early 70s Southern England routes in the game, it would still be nice to get an enhancement pack, or better yet, a whole new model for the 2 HAL, not to mention a backdated version of the Medway Valley line as well. We'll stay on the topic of Southern Region EMUs for my final suggestion today. This is the Class 402 5 Wes, otherwise known as Wessex Electrics or Plastic Pigs. I'll admit that, while I do like the 442s, I wouldn't consider myself to be a massive fan of them, but I know of at least one other YouTuber who is. 24 examples of this distinctive 5-car design were built between 1987 and 1989, initially for service on the Southwestern Main Line after the electrification was extended from Bournemouth to Weymouth. The 442s would later go on to serve with Gatwick Express and a Southwestern Railway, but were prematurely, and dare I say tragically, withdrawn in the early 2020s right after a major refurbishment. On a more positive note, the Class 442 still holds the distinction of being the world's fastest third-rail EMU. The Class 442 was released for TS Classic in May 2015, but the default pack has a lot of issues that shouldn't have made it out to customers in the first place. For starters, you only get one livery, namely Gatwick Express, and the sounds are inaccurate because they were reused from Thomson's Class 455-9. The unit doesn't have auto-numbering in a default state, and the interior livery is apparently from the Southwest Trains era, and thus it doesn't match the external livery. There are other issues besides the ones I mentioned, mainly referring to the sounds. This unit is in a similar situation to the Class 92, in the sense that, while it got an AP sound pack in May 2016, the sound pack has since been discontinued despite being pretty good, at least in my opinion. If AP ever made an enhancement pack for the Class 442, they could add a working GSMR radio module alongside all the other usual features, not to mention all the liveries that these units ever carried, from Network Southeast in 1988 to Southwestern Railway in 2019. That way, people wouldn't need to go scouring the internet to try and find specific reskins. So there you have it, a random selection of locomotives and multiple units that, in my opinion, deserve the Armstrong Powerhouse treatment again, or for the first time, in the case of the Class 24 and Class 402 to HAL. If there are any other locomotives or multiple units that you feel deserve enhancement packs, or entirely new models, feel free to leave your ideas in the comments. I don't expect AP themselves to watch this video, but even then, I don't see anything wrong with still going ahead and putting ideas out there.